In this video, I want to talk about the paradigm of shared incompetence. Now, in an individualistic cult or culture, the idea is that we're all isolated individuals, and we're each 100% responsible for our situation, right? If I'm rich, that's because of me. If I'm poor, that's because of me. If I know what I'm doing here, that's because of me. If I'm socially illiterate, that's because of me, right? So that's kind of the direction of thought in an individualistic cult or culture. It's all about the individual, and you have to do something to improve your life. Now, if you are fortunate enough to do a variety of things to improve your life, you saved up money, you invested in the right things, you took the right courses, you had good genes, you were born into the right country that gave you a terrific opportunity. Warren Buffett often comments, as one of the most successful investors in history, that if he was born on the African plains before the age of mathematics, his particular talent, analyzing numbers, would have been useless, and his incompetence, his physical coordination, would have made him a terrible hunter, and he would have been the runt of the tribe, right? It just so happens that his particular gift of analyzing numbers was met by a culture that is fanatically obsessed with money and the accumulation of money out of, other money, right? To turn money into more money is one of the greatest obsessions of our cult. And Warren is really good at analyzing the numbers, and as long as he's rich, he doesn't have to be physically coordinated because other people will go out and hunt for him, right? But if we're fortunate enough to be in a situation where we are excellent, where we know how to do things 5, 10 times better than other people, even 50% better, right? There is a tendency, I know I experience it, to be critical, to be irritated, to be impatient. Why didn't you think of that? Why do I have to fix your work, right? Why didn't you watch a YouTube video before doing this, right? It's right here, right? What's going on, right? And I run a landscape company, and so this is the context. Having started my business at age 17, found a terrific group of mentors, brought them on board, learned everything that I could, gaining literally 160 years of specialized knowledge from 5 of the top mentors in horticulture and heavy equipment excavation and septic systems and irrigation and concrete work. Having brought that in and brought it to bear on my jobs and learned and succeeded tremendously. Why aren't these people wanting to learn? Why don't they have the same interest in reading a book? Or why aren't they asking me the questions for free that I paid to learn? Because I've got 30 years of synthesized knowledge, and I paid to get that, to get that knowledge. And why wouldn't they want to get that for free? It's a mystery, right? Well, this, transfers, the problem over to them. And I think that's, in an individualistic culture, that's a natural conclusion. They should fix their apathy about learning, and then they should learn, and then they should become better employees, right? That's the idea, right? But the paradigm of shared incompetence looks at something a little bit differently, right? Because I'm not happy with the caliber of interest in learning or the attention to detail in any of my landscape crew, right? Every single one of them miss things that if I was doing it, I wouldn't miss, partly because I'm paying for it, and partly because I tend to look at worst case scenarios in the future and then look at what I'm doing and, what if this happened and that, here, let me do this, right? So that's my system. Doesn't seem to be their system. Now, the question, though, is, in 30 years, why have I not been able to train landscape employees more competently than I have, right? In 30 years, why haven't I been able to find, because they're out there, there's no question, that this is, I'm not an anomaly somewhere. I may be a 5% of, I may be a 1% of people with those aptitudes and those interests in the industry. I could be half of 1%. But, in a country of millions and millions and tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people, that means there are thousands of people that would love to collaborate with someone else with competency. But I haven't found them, right? And I haven't trained them. And then we turn to customers, right? Why do customers like to do the same boring things over and over again? Why, with the whole world of possibility in front of them, does a customer say, well, I kind of liked what that neighbor did over there. I don't want to stand out. Let's do what the neighbors do. Why do they all do that? Or 95% of them, and only just a few actually spend the same amount of money or less to do something more interesting, more exciting, that brings them more aliveness. Why? Why, right? And that's, of course, the customer problem, right? Why are they so boring? Well, on the flip side, right, that means that I'm part of a boring culture. Why am I unable to bring more life to my community, to my culture? Why is it that I haven't instilled an interest in innovation, in creativity, in the majority of my community members? It's a different focus. And why haven't I, since there are clients out there that love, interest, why haven't I created those clients? Right? You look at like a Frank Gehry in architecture and you say, that's weird, that's expensive and weird, right? It's definitely that. And then to some it's beautiful, to some it's definitely new and innovative. And people are spending hundreds of millions of dollars for new and innovative. But I haven't created that, right? I haven't found the customer that wants to spend $100 million to do something innovative. So, the focus in shared competency is to understand that we're all part of a circle. The circle may be the neighborhood, the circle may be the country, the circle may be the cult or culture, the circle may be the family, the circle may be my landscape crew and my clients and me. We're all part of a circle. And we all have influence on one another. Everyone influences directly or indirectly everyone else. If I smoke a cigarette, more people die of secondhand smoke, or there's more carbon in the air for everyone, right? If I cut a tree down, there's more carbon in the air for everyone, right? We all have a certain amount of influence on every other person on the planet, on every animal on the planet. We all have impact. And so when we look at a situation and we measure its competency, one of the best formulas, the formula that I use for intelligence, is the efficiency with which energy, time, money, and natural resources is transformed into sustainable well-being. So one person can take an hour and $1 and a pair of chopsticks, and they can entertain 100 people, right? They have the talent, they have the competency with $1, a pair of chopsticks, and an hour to bring laughter, to bring joy to 150 people, right? Maybe they start doing an interesting dance and start singing and go to the community square, or maybe they look at it, stop at a traffic jam. And they do something with those chopsticks, with the moment, that brings life to 150 people, that doubles the enjoyment. It's not hard to do if you're in a traffic jam, right? Performers along the freeway in a traffic jam, whatever. Planes flying. But there are easy ways where the vast majority of people are miserable to bring them into a state of wonder, to entertain, for example. Now somebody else takes $1 million and 10 years and cuts down an entire forest and makes an entire watershed and village miserable. I'm not saying this is always the case. I'm just saying you can spend a lot of money and a lot of time to make things worse. And that would be a symptom of low competence, low intelligence. Because everyone wants the same thing, to feel sustainably better and to avoid feeling chronically worse. So what we're measuring is how skillful are you at the universal goal, or at least at the human goal, the universal human goal. All humans want to feel better and don't want to feel bad. And they're pursuing that with their time, their attention, their money, their natural resources, as best they can, based on their current level of competency. And some are spending vast amounts of energy to make things worse. DuPont, with Teflon, has introduced the chemical C8 into the global bloodstream, creating birth defects, creating all manner of deformations in their employees, polluting the local watershed. They've consumed vast amounts of natural resources, spent vast amounts of time and money to introduce a toxic chemical that you and I can take a blood test today, and the odds are high that there will be C8 in our bloodstream through exposure to Teflon all around the world. And that was covered up, right, in order to facilitate shorter-term profits. Right? Is that intelligent? You don't have sticky pancakes. You just have birth defects in your children, right? Is the trade-off worthwhile? You can have pancakes that are easier to flip. If you don't mind a 1 or 2% mutation in your offspring, right? The employees at DuPont dealt with it the most, as did the cows in the area, because the water was polluted, right? But you can still find it just through the direct exposure in Teflon, right? Was that intelligent? You see, it's only intelligent if you hide the truth. If you hide the cost, then a lot of things are intelligent. You can have an affair. You could have sex with her, as long as you don't mind losing your marriage, losing your trustworthiness, confusing your kids. You could have it all if you would just give up everything that matters, right? There's a cost to everything. Now, intelligence is measured by the efficiency with which energy, time, money, natural resources, attention, is transformed into sustainable well-being. And I look around, we look around, and we say, why all the waste over there? It's easy, incompetence. The people involved with over there don't have a very high level of competence. Well, they need to, isn't it incompetent to expect incompetent people to become competent? I mean, if they were competent enough to become competent, they'd be competent people. Well, I don't want to go over and teach them how to do their job. No, you don't, right? You want to blame them for not knowing how to do their job. That's incompetent. And so this is where the shared incompetence paradigm comes in. There is an ideal, fictional on one level, but true in the abstract. It is possible for one individual to dramatically increase the competence of the entire species. One individual, one man, one woman, over the course of a lifetime, could be so competent that they could 10x the planet. It's not impossible, right? It's possible. How might they go about it? Well, Elon Musk is a good role model for some of that. Like to get you have to find people that are making a major contribution. You know, Gandhi made a major contribution. Jesus made some major contributions. Buddha, some major contributions. Elon Musk is making some major contributions, mostly in the arena of first principles engineering. So Elon, from a young age, has asked the question, what are the most important things for humanity and humanity's future? What are the things that really matter? And he picked sustainable energy, which leads to sustainable transportation, electric cars, solar, and becoming multiplanetary. Elon, as a young child, read every book in the library. He'd wander into bookstores and just read an entire book because it wasn't in the library. And he understood that every 60 million years or so, a major event is likely to happen. An asteroid, for example, with the dinosaurs. He also understood that the next one could happen anytime. And if everything beautiful about life was taken off planet, if there was a backup drive, you lost your hard drive, you lost your computer, right? Don't worry, it's backed up in the cloud. You haven't lost a lifetimes of work, right? It's backed up, right? He understood that if we could bring genetic samples, a small group of human beings, to Mars or another off-planet body that we could preserve. We could preserve what we have here as a pattern that could begin to inseminate the star system. And so he set out to found 3 companies that all of his friends tried to dissuade him from founding on the basis that they were likely to fail. Solar, losing money right and left. Electric cars, no one of all the people trying to start them had been really successful with that. No car company in the last 100 years had escaped bankruptcy in the US other than Ford. It was tough. And space, only countries had managed to launch a rocket into space before. And so these were not good odds. But Elon worked 100-hour weeks. He was willing to fail. He was willing to feel more pain. He was willing to work harder than anyone on the planet at these issues. And he was willing to invest all his money, knowing he was likely to fail and working all the harder to prevent it. And now we have Tesla, Solar City now become a part of Tesla. We have the Boring Company, we have Hyperloop, we have SpaceX, and the new crisis, averting a potential AI catastrophe, and the crisis of taking the slow process of talking and typing and speeding up the interface of communication with Neuralink. The idea of linking thought and technology. And robotics, right? That idea is, through competency, transforming the world. Now, in the process of going into the unknown, with 100-hour weeks, with an entire library of knowledge brought into the brain, with ethics, with transparency. In the process of that, we've got an incredibly rare phenomena. Success in all of these companies. And Elon has become the wealthiest person in the world. And getting more access to more resources, right? And Elon is not consuming very much. He lives in a $50,000 foldable house as I make this video. He's not buying a lot of expensive jets and cars. He's putting that energy to work, to bring life, to bring patterns of plants and people and animals off planet, to be ready for the next asteroid, and potentially to be able to avert it by having 1,000 starships out in space, ready for the journey to Mars, but also ready to spot an asteroid and with combined strength to shunt it off course, to break it into pieces in a way one missile couldn't do, right? This is a phenomenal transformation. It's a phenomenal elevation of human potential, technology. One man is changing the world. Not just griping about it, but actually creating a reputation where the best people in the world, in AI, in space, in engineering, want to work with Elon. In other words, Elon has done what I have failed to do, which is surround himself by highly competent people. Right? And so that's where the shared competence comes in, right? That person is possible. It's highly improbable, right? There's no other Elon Musks. That means the planet, with its current level of competency, is only producing one Elon Musk and then a few other runners-up, right? Dean Kamen, for example, with a lot of beautiful inventions and medical technology. Peter Diamandis, and I forget his co-founder's name again, beautiful technology and ideas. Right? But our planet is producing a handful. The competency of parents, the competency of government, of our planet is producing a handful of people that are doing more than 99% of the population combined to positively facilitate growth and evolution on this planet. Right? We could produce more. But that would mean we would have to become more competent. We could become more. But again, we would have to become more competent. So, in the paradigm of shared competency, understanding that one person can have a major impact in any given area, reducing nuclear missile proliferation, increasing the number of trees planted to 1 trillion trees. Planting 1 trillion trees, by the way, is a no-brainer, right? We start with a global crowdfunding, right? Plant 1 trillion trees. Calculate the amount of trees needed to balance our present CO2 emissions and commit to planting that number of trees, something we absolutely know how to do, something that can be massively beneficial. Imagine planting 1 trillion trees in a desert using solar, the Boring Company, desalination, and turning completely uninhabitable landscape, cooling the planet. It gets very, very hot in the desert. Cooling the planet by reclaiming, 1 million miles of desert? I mean, would anyone object to a world crowdfunding initiative? You go to a country with a big desert, you say, we'd like to work as a world to make your country a lot more valuable. How do you feel about that? Do you want to chip in? Do you want to allow? All we have to do is bore in tunnels, to slant into the center of the desert, and put desal plants in the tunnels for weather protection, and then irrigate and stabilize 1 million miles of desert. With 1 trillion trees, we can offset the current levels of carbon emissions, and then some, and then some. And every year for the next 100 years, those trees will be taking more out of the atmosphere than we are releasing into the atmosphere, and mitigating the volatility, the wind speeds, the hurricanes around that area, right? Because when you have desert, you have very hot temperatures, you have very cold temperatures. That temperature volatility creates massive amounts of wind. And then that goes out and creates synergies with other flows of wind to create major destructive storms. Well, if you can insulate the desert and delete millions of miles of temperature volatility, the temperature changes less and slower, and the winds that come off of that are less and slower. Right? Everyone wins. The country wins, the desert wins, habitat wins. It's far cheaper than putting habitat on the moon or Mars. And then we take rising sea levels and we lower the sea levels. What about that, right? Pumping out of the ocean to water a desert. And when the salt accumulates, if we really can't figure out what to do with it, maybe we can make batteries out of it. When the salt accumulates with the desal process, just abandon the tunnel filled with salt and do another one. And another one. As the boring company brings tunnels down, 10 million a mile. Right? It becomes affordable. What a fun crowdfunding project. You know, and the irony is the entire thing can be bonded and then turned into saleable real estate. Nobody wants to buy a mile of wind-swept sand dunes in baking sun without any water. Of course not. But a tropical climate in the desert that's now rainforest, that's now green in only 30 years, how valuable is that property with a 30-year bond? So that you don't even have to give the trillion trees to the planet. You can invest in them, put a buffer, right? And expand the desert. Expand the boundary, the incursion into desert, creating forest, reducing rising sea levels, providing water underground in the desert, providing jobs, increasing manufacturing, a boring company, planting 1 trillion trees, and getting rid of guilt and stupidity. It doesn't take a lot of competence to be guilty and stupid. It takes more competence to solve the problem you felt guilty and stupid about, right? So, positive directions. Greater habitat for wildlife, endangered species. The opportunity to orchestrate forests of beauty, to create landscapes, rolling hills that were once sand dunes. This is incredible. But one person has to have that idea. And one person has to care enough to do something about it. And one person has to persevere in the face of incompetence, right? In the face of apathy, like Elon Musk. Persevering in the face of dissuasion, in the face of apathy. Don't do it, it'll never work, was the advice of all of his wealthy friends. Do what we've done. Buy an island. Live in luxury. Become famous for being famous. Right? You've already started PayPal. Right? Elon offers some glimpses to what that ideal could be. One person changing the planet. And why not me? Why not you? What would that look like? How far could you go against the herd? Because herd mentality is all about maintaining norms. That's why cult is the root word of culture. Just go back to the way everyone else is doing it. That's not the way we do things, says the cult. It doesn't try to justify itself based on intelligence. For example, we've examined all of the habits of all of the peoples of the planet, and we've determined scientifically that the way that we're eating food brings more nourishment, more value than any other way that anyone is eating food. And that's why we're teaching it to you. Like, that would be intelligent. That would be science. But a cult doesn't rely on data or science. A cult isn't intelligent. A cult just says, don't do that. That's bad. Why is it bad? Because it's not the way we do things. Do this because it's good. Why is it good? Because it's the way we do things. Cult think. Intelligence. Cult thought. Intelligent thought. Intelligence is always moving. It's always evolving. It's always reframing and questioning. That's intelligence. That's intelligent thought. So we as a planet are at the level of competence that we are. We as a planet, as a people, consume a certain number of natural resources. We all consume the same amount of time. We consume different amounts of resources in different areas of the planet. And we produce certain amounts of emotional, physical, mental well-being and ecological well-being in different areas of the planet. Bhutan is a carbon-negative country and interested in staying that way. Right? The US, China, carbon positive, right? Offsetting far more carbon every year. And there are vast deserts within both China and the United States. China is doing more to reclaim their deserts. There are abandoned farmsteads. There are deserts throughout California and Utah, waiting for 1 trillion trees, waiting for green jobs, waiting for intelligence. And we are waiting for other people to become more intelligent. But that's not very intelligent, right? So we're waiting for us to become more intelligent. And that's not very intelligent. Right? We're at the level of intelligence we're at because we're not intelligent enough to become more intelligent than we are. If we were, we would be doing it. You and I would be doing it. We're at the level we're at because it would take being smarter to be at a higher level. And if we were smarter, we would be at that level. And then we would be at that level, right? It's an endless continuum of competence, of intelligence, of growth. So everyone can become more intelligent, can become more competent. The more people that do, the easier it is for others to become intelligent and competent because it's a network effect. If you do something very intelligent and nobody knows how to respond because they're not intelligent, you give up on the intelligent thing because you need to depend on other people. Right? So if you're surrounded by dumb people, first of all, that means that you're not competent enough to teach whatever you're calling dumb. Right? And they're going to be whatever you call dumb until you teach them. Obviously, nobody else is teaching them, or they wouldn't be whatever it is you're calling dumb, right? If you're surrounded by idiots, you're not smart enough to teach them, and neither is anyone else. And they're not smart enough to teach themselves, or they would have done it by now, right? It's not fun being ignorant, being dumb. It's a reflection of the level of competence in the entire circle. So you can look at someone and say, oh, that's a smart person, and that's a dumb person. But the smart person isn't smart enough to teach, to inspire the dumb person, or they're both smart, right? So what's useful is for every person to be getting better than they were before. Everyone starts at a different position, right? If you're born addicted to crack in a black ghetto, you've got more challenges, more weights to shovel off of your probability field before you can even come close to breaking even of someone else. Private tutors with the right skin color for a racially incompetent cult, right? There isn't a right skin color in a racially competent cult, right? People have learned through intelligence that there are other things that are worth paying attention to more than a person's skin color. The data supports it. So a racially competent culture grasps it. An ignorant culture, a shame-based culture, a fear-based culture may stigmatize some of its people based on heritage, based on skin color. A competent cult measures what matters. Level of communication talent, level of integrity, level of skill in different areas. And a competent cult facilitates the learning and care of all of its members. Because every cult is trying to recruit members. Be like us. Why? Because that's the way we do things. It's often the best a cult has to offer. But most cults die. Most cultures in human history are dead. 95% of them are now extinct. If you want your cult, your culture to survive, it's got to become more and more intelligent to be worthy of being chosen. Otherwise, it will join the 95% that die, that are dying, that are dead. So I find this helpful because I can't get my landscape crew to be more interested in learning than they are. But I can look for other people. I can incentivize them and give bonuses. Right? Doesn't make sense to me. I paid to learn. But I can try a variety of things. I can read books. I can pick better people. Right? These are things I can do. And it all comes back to us at some level. It all goes out at some level. I'm a moron. Okay, that means my parents and my entire cult raised a moron, right? You can go out, this paradigm says that every single member of the circle is capable of influencing every other member of the circle. And if there's a flaw in the circle, everyone is a participant in creating that. Right? There have been cultures with little or no crime. They just knew what they were doing more than we do, because our culture is filled with crime. Right? So what does a competent culture look like that isn't filled with crime? Well, one is they have fewer laws. Right? All you have to do to turn your entire cult into criminals is say, if you drink water, you're a criminal. And everyone will be dead, and your cult will be dead, or everyone will be a criminal. Right? So fewer laws and higher investments in the intelligence of members. Understanding that a law is a very fixed thing, and you can't always understand when applying the law would help people and when it would hurt people. Because every fixed structure sometimes is beneficial and sometimes is harmful. So you have fewer fixed structures and you have more training and competence in ethics and intelligence. That's one direction, right? And then you train people to be better as a response to the crime rather than spend vast amounts of public money to make them worse. That's jail. You come out of jail, you are statistically less competent than when you went in. That's stupid. To spend billions upon billions of public money to make people less competent is stupid. But that's the kind of thing that incompetent people do to other incompetent people. Right? So it's all ultimately, it's about everyone, but it's also 100% about us. If people are too dumb to recognize our talents, then we're too dumb to help them recognize our talents. If people are too dumb not to participate in this way, then we're too dumb to teach them why that's such a good idea. In the end, the responsibility, the ability, and the willingness to respond is shared equally by all of us. And when our competence goes up, the competence of the group goes up. When the group competence goes up, our competence goes up.